I'm Doug Smith, and welcome to a special edition of Portsmouth This Week. Today we're going to be discussing the Portsmouth Emergency Management Agency and emergency management procedures in Portsmouth. My special guests today are John King, the EMA Director. Welcome, John. And also Rich Tilipsky, who is the Director of the newly formed Internet Public Information Group within the EMA. Welcome, Rich.
Thank you.
John, as you know, we went through Hurricane Irene just about a year ago, and there seem to be a lot of problems with public communications. I know you guys have really done a lot of work on putting a much more robust system together. I wonder if you could explain a little bit.
Thank you, Doug. Yes, it came to light after Tropical Storm Irene that we didn't do a great job of public information, communicating the events in real time to the public. We took a look at that and we came up with a three-pronged approach of public information. We use our local broadcast media, the two AM radio stations in the area, WSAR in Fall River, WADK in Newport. Matter of fact, I've been in contact with both those stations in the past 24 hours. They're right on board with us to get out information to the broadcast stations. We also have a website now, an emergency management website. It's separate from the town website, and we can update that in real time 24 hours a day. We also have social media outreach. We have accounts on both Facebook and Twitter. So between those three things, we have much better dissemination of public information than we had during Tropical Storm Irene. The Internet Public Information Unit is entirely staffed by volunteers. EMA is a small operation in Portsmouth, as it is in all 39 cities and towns, with the exception perhaps of Providence. EMAs are small operations. We depend on the volunteers in Portsmouth to run the Internet Public Information Unit, and Rich here is the leader of that unit. He might want to address the Internet Public Information.
Okay, before we get to that, though, there's a fourth leg of this communications thing, and that's
thank you
Code
for
Red.
reminding me. Code Red. Code Red is in many ways the cornerstone of the emergency notification system. Public information are the three venues I mentioned earlier. Emergency notification to the town is via a reverse 911 system. The brand name of the system is Code Red. That was installed in September, and it's fully operational. And everyone that has a landline phone in Portsmouth has been entered into the system if their number was publicly accessible. People that have unlisted phone numbers, unpublished phone numbers, should sign up manually for Code Red. They can do that on the Portsmouth Town website or the Portsmouth Emergency website, or they could call Town Hall or call the police department, call the fire department. If you have any doubt, it doesn't hurt to sign up, even though you may be in there already. Sign up early and often for Code Red.
Okay, so there's essentially a whole spectrum of possibilities here for learning more about emergency things. Right now, for example, we've got Hurricane Sandy that's making a lot of noise down in the Caribbean that we're keeping a close watch on. Rich, you want to talk about those different social media and other venues?
Sure. We found out that a lot of people use social media in the town. We have thousands of email accounts. I think the last count was 17,000 social media accounts in just Portsmouth, more than people we have in Portsmouth, because people have multiple accounts. Some people use Twitter, some people use Facebook, people go to the web. So we thought that that's a great way to get information out to the people. In fact, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA, has talked about this, and they have specific procedures to use these social media in emergency events. So John started an internet public information team, and there's about 4 of us that have been trained through FEMA procedures to kind of manage that during an emergency. So when even before an emergency, the EOC is activated, we can monitor what's going on in social media. And we have, number one, we have the website, which is www.portsmouthemergency.com. And that's, kind of, go to the website and you can go to a little tab that's called blog on there. If you click on the blog tab, that's like a running commentary of authoritative information that's going on for the storm. If you want to be a little bit more interactive using Facebook and Twitter, we have a Facebook account. If you go to a search for Portsmouth Emergency on Facebook, then there'll be a Facebook account where you can interact with the town. If you're a Twitter person, you can go to Portsmouth EMEREG on Twitter, and you can use the @ for that, and you can actually communicate with us. Or during an emergency, if you just want information about a particular emergency, we have a hashtag system, which is the #. You can go to #Sandy 02871, and then you can follow feeds on what's going on Sandy.
Okay, and that would be Sandy specifically.
Sandy specifically.
So you do a different one of these probably for every
That's
different,
right. That's
tropical
right.
storm or hurricane.
But you can always go to @Portsmouth EMEREG to Twitter the emergency management system.
Okay. So it looks to me like the one to keep on track of what's really going on. The authoritative word on things is the blog on the
right.
EMA homepage.
Go to the website and click on the blog tab, and this will be a running inventory about what's going on. John has been putting information periodically about Sandy, so if you want to know the current information about Sandy, you can go to the blog, click on one of his blog entries, and it'll give you the current information about Sandy.
Okay, I think the interesting thing about Facebook and Twitter is it provides information back to you all.
That's correct.
It tells you what's going on, how citizens perceive what's going on, which is probably just about as important, and allows you to then maybe move resources if you need to during the crunch. But
That's
to see
correct.
How will these kind of feeds and things from Facebook and Twitter, how do you possibly monitor all these things?
Well, we have a thing called TweetDeck. That's the software. There are many kinds of software. We use TweetDeck, where we can actually monitor all the different social media on a screen at the Emergency Operations Center, and we can actually see all those on one screen. If somebody's tweeting something, we can put a Facebook entry out, and we can also put a blog entry so that all that information is getting out to all the people that use all the different kind of media.
Okay. I think this is a much more robust capability we have here, because it's not only collecting information in the EOC when it's manned, but it's also providing another way to get the word out to people.
That's correct. I mean, if somebody sees a tree down or there's something wrong, they can tweet that or Facebook that, and we can evaluate it. We can get the police out to take a look at it, and then we can put it out as a blog entry to say, avoid this street because there's a tree down, or even put it out as a tweet saying, there's a tree down blocking West Main Road or something like that.
Right. So I think this is a great leap forward, more or less, in the way of public communications
Absolutely.
in Portsmouth. And I applaud John for doing that. Back to you, John. Let me just ask you a question about the EOC, for example. As I say, Sandy, at worst case, it does come up this way. It's still several days away. I know you're watching it very carefully. At what point is the EOC stood up, and who mans the EOC?
The EOC, Emergency Operations Center, is staffed by myself, the emergency manager. We have a internet public information team that Rich just described to you. Those people are actually in the EOC during an activation, and there's a separate communications team for radio and other communications with the agencies in the town, the state agencies, our liaison agencies, Red Cross, etc. So there are at least 3 units in the EOC. Other town agencies can operate out of the EOC. We have a recent request from Narragansett, I'm sorry, it's not Narragansett Electric anymore, it's National Grid. National Grid to have one of their representatives resident in our EOC.
That's a good idea.
Well, he liked the EOC so much that he wanted to call it his home, so that's very good news for Portsmouth, because he's the East Bay representative, and it would be very good to have him under our roof. So we welcome him aboard. The EOC would be stood up at least 48 hours before any landfall. If landfall were anticipated to be in an area that would impact us, EOC would be stood up 48 hours in advance. The EOC was most recently stood up several days ago, less than a week ago, when we had the marina fire. and no one knew exactly the scope of that incident, where that was going to go, if we were going to need support from upstate. The EOC was
And that happened
activated.
in the middle of the night, as I recall.
It was late evening, yes, yes.
Thanks for not calling everybody in.
Well, believe me, you were on the short list of people to call. The fire department made a marvelous stop on that. The only reason we got to go home from the EOC early was because the fire department made a marvelous stop down there.
Full disclosure, I guess, I'm a member of Rich's team on this thing with John. So, like I say, thanks for not calling everybody in on this. One of the interesting things you mentioned earlier was some of the other information that's available on the website. And Rich, or either one of you, you might want to mention the emergency preparation brochure that you have that's on the site. And what does that contain, and how can people get access to that?
On the website, there is a tab called Prepare on the menu, and under that tab you can find the town's hurricane brochure, a stunningly attractive 6-page trifold brochure on hurricane preparedness specific to the town of Portsmouth, all the names and numbers you would need in a hurricane emergency. There's also a link on that page to a resource that I highly recommend to everyone, and it's ready.gov, www.ready.gov. That's FEMA's website on emergency preparedness, and they literally wrote the book on it, and for me to publish emergency readiness information would be really redundant to what our partners at FEMA already have out there. If you have not visited ready.gov, I highly encourage you to go there before an emergency is upon us.
Well, I would imagine that a lot of the information you post on all three of your venues, from the website to Facebook to Twitter, would be kind of rebroadcasts of the credible stuff that's coming down from higher authority, FEMA and others, like NOAA, for example, and the weather. In other words, you're not making all these things up necessarily yourself.
We don't make the stuff up, no. The hurricane tracking information that we post comes from the National Weather Service, from NOAA's Hurricane Center. They're all federally funded sources. We simply don't have the resources.
Absolutely. Well, there's no point, because they do all this stuff, and they're much more better staffed than we would be locally. One thing back to Rich, and for that matter, both of you guys. In a real emergency, people should call 911. House on fire, there's a major accident, whatever. But the thing is, if people want to just get more information, or perhaps report something a little that's not a danger right now, like a big tree that fell across the road or something, how do they contact the Emergency Operations Center?
The two contact numbers that I would recommend for non-emergency, this is specifically for non-emergency, are the routine number at the police department, 683-1200, and the routine number at, I'm sorry, I have these backwards, don't I? The routine number at the police station is 683-0300. The routine number at Portsmouth Fire is 683-1200.
Okay.
Anything else, call 911. When in doubt, call 911.
Okay. Now, is there any way for them to contact, and we just talked about the couple venues here, for them to contact the EOC directly?
Either one of those numbers can patch right through to the EOC.
Okay, but how about like if somebody's online, can they tweet?
They can tweet. They can tweet. They can also email. There's an email address which is called safety@portsmouthemergency.com, and we'll receive those emails as well. So if you want to email us, that'll work as well.
Okay, great.
I do have to caution people on the use of email. During an actual emergency, things can be quite busy in the EOC, so if you are looking for an immediate response, email may not be the best method to get it in an emergency.
So an emergency, call 911.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Always.
Okay.
In every
we
case.
monitor Twitter and Facebook. We don't always monitor all the emails
Right.
on a continuing basis, but we have that screen where we use that tweet deck to monitor all those social media.
Yeah, and
so that's probably the best way to get to us.
And I might mention that they've got this system in the EOC that displays the screen up on a big screen, so everybody can see, everybody else in the EOC can see it. We have to take a short break right now. Rich, thank you very much for being with us.
Pleased
We'll
to
be
be
right
here.
back. Okay, welcome back to our special edition of Portsmouth This Week on emergency management procedures in Portsmouth. Our second new guest is John Clem, Town Administrator. Welcome, John.
Thank you.
I want to get back to both of you to mention to talk briefly about this Code Red system. This was one that it was discussed a lot because there's a fee involved in this one, and it seems to me that it makes a lot of sense. We know the Water Board already has used this quite well, I think, over the last year or so. How do you see the Code Red or the reverse 911 thing fitting into this public communication system, Mr. King?
Code Red is more than public communications. Code Red is emergency notification. It's a warning system. Code Red would be the air raid siren of the 21st century. It's mass warning. We push out a warning very quickly with Code Red and target it to specific areas.
Okay. John, Mr. Clem, I should say. We have two Johns, so I have to go back and forth. But how would you, what kind of things do you conceive of being used for Code Red? I imagine it's something you don't want to use very much. You don't want people to get used to it.
Well, as John said, it is an incredibly powerful tool. But it is important to recognize that in a general sense, our citizens do not like to be bothered by calls that aren't deemed an emergency. And clearly, we've made a commitment that this tool would only be used in appropriate circumstances. And we're working very closely with fire and police in that regard. So I think our citizens can rest assured that we would not be utilizing this system if it were not an emergency situation, and that's our commitment to the community. It is about as effective a tool as we could have, and I can't say enough about John's research and support for this, as well as our town council that voted to put this in the budget, because, as you said, there is a financial aspect to it. And I would be remiss if I didn't thank the water district, because we have partnered with them, which has lowered the cost. And so through John's hard work and the grant that we've received and the partnership with the water district, we've reduced the cost of this significantly. And I don't think that there'll be any resident in our town that questions the value of it the first time that it's needed.
Sure. So in the current context with Hurricane Sandy rolling around the Caribbean, for example, the kind of thing I would imagine you'd use it for is it for mandatory evacuations if it became necessary to, say, Island Park, Common Fence Point, the low-lying areas, to get the word out that way. The one nice thing is that just about everybody's got a regular old telephone. The net is available to everybody, but everybody doesn't necessarily use it. But usually they have telephones at the very least.
Well, the concern that, I'll ask John to address this, but at some point during a hurricane, people might lose service, and so that's why the radio, as John had mentioned before, it becomes so critical as well.
Let me mention that because, John, you mentioned in the first half of this program that you looked at WADK, and what was the one over in Fall River?
WSAR, that's 1480 AM.
Yeah. So those would be the go-to stations if power goes out, for example, like happened in Irene, we're without power for 26 hours in my area. But everybody's got battery-powered radios, so I mean they could have some way of listening.
I certainly hope that everyone has a battery-operated radio, and if you're listening to this and you don't, please acquire a battery-operated radio.
Right.
In the event of a widespread power failure, WSAR will remain on the air. That's why that's a very attractive outlet for public information for emergency purposes. They have a generator, they're independent from the commercial power mains, and they have a great signal in Portsmouth, 1480 AM. I spoke with their general manager just yesterday, and he's more than willing to help us out here in Portsmouth. Great people to work with, true partners. Our friends down at WADK are absolutely sterling partners. I've known them for a long, long time. WADK unfortunately does not have backup power, so in the event of an island-wide power failure, WADK will be off the air. Now, we also disseminate the information up the chain to the state level, and as do all the 39 cities and towns. And we did this during Irene, but sometimes Portsmouth has a tendency to fall through the cracks because The major broadcast outlets, for some reason, concentrate on Providence, Warwick, Cranston, the big cities, and Portsmouth may fall off their radar. So independent from the information we push up to the state level, we go out to our two local partners, WADK and WSAR.
Yeah, I would, WSAR comes in very clearly here. WADK sometimes in different parts of Portsmouth is actually hard to get, even though it's broadcast out of Newport somewhere. So WSAR sounds like a really great alternative here. And those are the ones that you would be in contact with if, in the event?
Direct contact. I have multiple contact numbers into both of those stations. They know who I am, and our public information officers in the town also have that access.
Okay, again, there's some terminology that I just wanted to clarify for people. If you hear about a hurricane watch and a hurricane warning, if you hear about a hurricane watch, basically, what does that mean for us?
If you hear about any sort of a watch, whether it's a hurricane watch, thunderstorm watch, tornado watch, the conditions are conducive that that weather system may develop. A watch doesn't mean that it's going to happen, it means the conditions are right for it to happen.
Okay.
A warning, on the other hand, means that
there's a good chance
this event will happen.
Okay, so even at a watch level, though, what do you recommend people do? Start to review what they're going to
Absolutely. It depends on the weather event the watch is for. Your response would be different probably to a snowstorm than it would be a hurricane.
Sure.
But at the watch stage, review your readiness plans, your family readiness plans. Make sure you have your contact numbers all lined up, your documents in a safe place, your food, water, all the things you do when you visit the site ready.gov.
Right.
Have all those ducks in a row.
Okay, now are those, is that kind of thing listed in the preparation part of the EMA website?
That's, yes,
so you got
the link to ready.gov will get you all those tips.
I know one of the entries you recently made on there had to do with emergency lighting, essentially flashlights, I guess, with, make sure you got fresh batteries and things like that. So that'd be one thing they want to check that. The shelter in Portsmouth, we no longer actually have a shelter in Portsmouth that's a Red Cross shelter per se. The Red Cross shelter on the island is at Gaudet Middle School.
Okay, I'm glad you asked that question, Doug, because there's a little misperception about sheltering and sheltering plans. The Red Cross is stretched in resources. Volunteerism is at an all-time low nationwide, although we're blessed in Portsmouth with so many volunteers. Red Cross is stretched thin. They decided last year they could not support 39 independent shelters in each city and town in Rhode Island. They have regionalized shelters in the event of a widespread disaster. If it were a disaster that affected all of Newport County, our shelter would be the regional shelter at Gaudet School in Middletown. If we were to have a disaster that impacted only Portsmouth and we needed to evacuate residents, the Portsmouth Middle School still functions as a shelter. It's still set up to be a shelter. The communications equipment is still there. Red Cross has the plans. In fact, they inspected it in April and May this year. The Red Cross was down to Portsmouth Middle. So we haven't lost Portsmouth Middle as a shelter, but in the event of a widespread emergency, we'll partner with Red Cross to use the Gaudet School in Middletown as a shelter.
Okay, so the going in position on, for example, on something like Sandy would be to start thinking, the first place, if you have to evacuate, would be the essentially Gaudet Middle School.
My first recommendation is family and friends. If you're in a situation, though, where you have to shelter in a public shelter, it would be Gaudet Middle School. The overflow plan for Gaudet is Portsmouth Middle School.
Okay.
So conceivably, if we filled up Gaudet Middle, we'd be right back here in Portsmouth.
Okay. So, and you would be telling people about this in all your different venues about
a good resource in that situation is 211. 211 is run by the United Way. They have current up-to-date sheltering information. They partner with Red Cross. 211 is a good resource to find out.
But I would think the EMA in Portsmouth would be telling people in Portsmouth where to go
exactly right.
If they're in evacuation
Red
situation.
Cross would make the call, and their threshold is 50%. If they're looking at 50% occupancy in a shelter, they will start the second shelter rolling. And we would know that ahead of time.
Okay, and that would be manned by volunteers from anywhere?
No,
Somewhere else?
American Red Cross.
And we don't have any American Red Cross volunteers?
Oh, we
in
do.
Portsmouth?
We do. We have several in Portsmouth.
Okay.
Card-carrying Red Cross volunteers.
Okay. Okay, thanks. I guess the other thing of interest to me was that I have 3 dogs. If people have pets, the Red Cross shelter doesn't take pets. So what do you recommend people do?
Excellent point, Doug. And we've looked into this issue within the past couple of weeks, as a matter of fact, and we've looked at it for a few months now. The best advice I can give you for pets is to do the same thing you would do if you were going on vacation. Make plans to board your pets with family or friends at a pet-friendly motel, hotel if they're already in the area, or a kennel. The shelter of last resort on Aquidneck Island is the Potter League shelter. And I worked in a joint seminar with the Potter Shelter and our partners in Middletown and Newport a couple weeks ago. The Potter Shelter has a finite capacity.
Sure.
And my feeling is that all 3 island communities, depending on Potter Shelter, will overflow their shelter pretty quickly. So we decided to call the Potter League shelter the shelter of last resort for pets.
Okay, but that is an option if you're totally stuck.
If you're totally stuck, and another resource is to call our animal control officer, that would be Ariel Fisher, call Portsmouth Police, ask for animal control, and she could give you guidance as well if you're stuck.
Okay, because that's very important for a lot of people. A lot of people won't leave their house if they can't do something with their animals. And I think the best advice really is what you mentioned. First, try to find some family or friends that are outside of the danger zone that you can go to, or that maybe will take your pets at least. And if nothing else, go somewhere in a safe area, which you never can tell. I would say that the safer areas in Portsmouth would be just higher than the low-lying areas, and try to ride out the storm there if you can.
My feeling is that most people in an area in Portsmouth that would have to evacuate likely have family or friends in an area that is safe. And that would be the most logical thing. Have them take your pets, and they may even take you.
Yeah, you never can tell.
You never can tell.
Another question I have to ask, the escape bridge here in Island Park is open.
It is open. It's in good shape. It's in the best shape I've ever seen it. It took them a little longer to open it than they anticipated, but it is good to go.
Okay, so that's a good escape route. A young lady down the street was asking me this morning, I was just having me walking down Park Avenue, and she lives in a house right on the water, and she was asking me if, does this water really get this high? And I said, well, not usually here. But down by the beach area, sometimes it goes over the road. That's why the escape bridge is called the escape bridge, because it gives residents here a way to get out if the road's flooded down there. So that's all good information. We're running out of time, but I'd like to ask each of you if you have anything. John, Clem, would you like to say anything to the people of Portsmouth about emergency management?
Well, you never can be prepared enough, and so we hope that citizens take this seriously, and for example, what we just discussed about thinking about relatives or whatever to visit in a safer location or whatever, but be prepared is what we want to spread.
Okay, and I think that would be your message as well, John.
Yes, and I also encourage you to visit portsmouthemergency.com. There are links there to our Facebook and our Twitter pages.
Okay, thanks very much, and thank you. We'll see you next time.